Welcome to NetApp On Air Snapshot. For the first time, thank you so much for joining us right here in the Expo at Insight 2024. Very excited to have you guys join us today. Thank you, Mario, for all the introductions. And thanks to George, our customers, and our partners for joining us for the keynote today. We got a lot in store for this week. We're just getting the party started. In fact, we are here in the Expo kicking off the welcome reception on day one. And a special shout out to anybody that joined us at the community warm-up party last night. Absolutely loved having you all there. Thank you so much for making that a really, really special night. We are going to do that much more and much bigger in the future. That I can promise you. So what do we got in store tonight? Well, if you just finished watching the keynote, this is for you, the people that aren't here. We're extending the event beyond the doors of the MGM here in Las Vegas, and we're making sure that all of our viewers online around the world that just couldn't make it here with us are also getting to be a part of the event this week. So how is this going to work? Every day after the keynote, we're going to be live right here in the Expo for 2 hours with a rotation of guests as we go through it, talking about and going over, giving some opinions and feedback on everything that was discussed during the keynote. So that's going to be really fun. We're going to field some of your questions. So if you have Q&A or any questions that you want to do, drop those into chat right here on YouTube. And if you're not watching on YouTube, come join us on the NetApp YouTube channel, and you can drop your questions in there, and we'll ask them right here on screen. Other housekeeping things, the Pin Hunter program is going on for those that are here at the event. You definitely want to get some of those to be a part of that, or if you're just watching live, you can come join our Discord community. It's discord.gg/NetApp, or just go to netappdiscord.com, and you can find a quick button there to come and join the community. We are 5,000 strong in there now across support staff, engineers, people like myself and our community manager, Drew Claybrook, many, many other NetAppers, but more importantly, many more of your peers are in there. So come in, say hi, jump into the Insight chat channel, and let everybody know that you're watching along with NetApp On Air right here during Snapshot. I've got a special guest, the first one up today, who's been on the show several times before. He helped me host one of our launch events back in May. He's a friend of the show, he's a friend of Discord, friend of our community, Mr. Jeff Baxter. Jeff, thanks for joining me here on the show. I really appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for having me, Nick. I really appreciate it.
So what did you think of what was discussed? Let's get this out of the way. What was some of the things that we went over in the keynote today? It seems to be there's a very big theme around AI.
Yes.
I don't know if you heard or not, but that AI seems to be a really important thing now.
I've heard, yeah. No, it's I think AI is transforming everything, right? And we recognize that. And I think what today's keynote was about, and I will say, I'll give people a sneak peek, right? It's very much a multiple day chapter of talking about AI and of talking about everything NetApp is going for, right? So the day 2 keynote tomorrow morning, just to plug that, there's going to be even more announcements, right? Both about AI and about non-AI matters as well, right? But I think what George and all of his guests were trying to do tonight was really set the stage of how AI is, at its core, a data problem, right? Yeah. And solving this AI data gap is crucial, right? So no one's discounting the need for, GPUs. No one's discarding the need for the network. No one's discarding the need for any of that. But if your data isn't in place, if your data isn't compliant, if your data isn't ready, it doesn't matter about the rest of your stack. It's literal garbage in, garbage out. And so I think tonight was really about starting to unpeel the vision of what it looks like to have data be truly AI ready.
Yeah, and I have a phrase I like to throw around that I'm committed to putting on a T-shirt at some point that says, no data, no AI. And I think a lot of what I heard from George, from all of the guest speakers as well, was that this is all about taking care of your data, the curation of that data, the mobility of that data, the global nature of it, the ability to move it around and access it from wherever you might be or where might need to use it. But absolutely, you have to get into that librarian level mindset of cataloging and classifying and all of that stuff. It's going to be not optional if it's not already very soon. And I can remember that's some of the stuff we used to do just for end user data, for SMB home drives and stuff like that. We would get very strict about departmental shares, having to name things, folders certain ways and stuff like that. I can't imagine the scope of what it takes for today's practitioners to have to go through these levels of classification, naming conventions, and things like that. So what are some of the ways that we can help them with that, where they're not sitting and randomly renaming files or doing batch PowerShell scripts just to rename a bunch of stuff. What's some of the ways that ONTAP can help facilitate that?
Yeah, so I think the conversation today, Krish sort of unveiled this concept of a global metadata namespace that we're building, right? And if anything, I think it was undersold in terms of the impact you're going to see over the next couple of years in NetApp and the community as a whole.
Right.
This vision that he unveiled, which is something that is being built right now, by the way. It's not vaporware. And that is about, instead of having to name your files the right thing, right? Instead of having to bring your files together, this concept of having to move everything into a data lake is dead, right? The amount of data, the speed of data, the latency, the idea that you're ever going to physically bring your data together is becoming more and more ludicrous by the day. The idea that you're going to constantly have some other engine out there constantly scanning your data, trying to keep up with the pace of data growth, that's not realistic any longer. But if you are the file system, if you have access to the metadata, and if you can synthesize that in real time into one synthetic view of your entire global namespace, and then be able to apply AI against it, whether it's natural language queries or whether it's actually taking it as a data collection and bringing it out towards AI engines, that's transformative in terms of what it means to be, in the AI era for data.
Absolutely. I'm looking at this through the lens of someone that sits at a keyboard or at a console managing systems and managing data to an extent. What are some practical things that they could sort of get in the habit of, in your mind, or what are some of the practical things that we could depend on ONTAP to help deliver? You mentioned this global metadata engine that we're building. Is that one of those things where we can drive classification down into the deepest bowels of your data and scan it all and classify it all? We don't have to depend on file level attributes so much anymore?
No. In terms of what people can do today, by the way, one of the biggest things they can do is get in and use BlueXP and use data classification today, right? So one of the things we did earlier this year was we made data classification free for all NetApp data, right? And usage has taken off from there, and it's an amazing success story. Everyone should be using it because you can go in and see your PII data, you can see your compliance data, you can see all of that, and that is the foundation of the Data Explorer and the metadata namespace that we're going to start to build.
Yeah.
So that when you have that metadata namespace, you can use compliance, you can use all those tools directly on top of it. So by using that, by making sure you have visibility into your entire data estate in BlueXP today, by making sure you're using the compliance tools you already have, you are already set up when this starts shipping.
Yeah. What do you see as some of the most exciting opportunities if we get into a kind of a solutions level conversation? Where do you see this really taking off? We've seen the rise of large language models and natural language interaction with Gen AI, ChatGPT, and the like. From a practical standpoint, where does this really start to affect upstream things that we used to do with Power BI or things like that? Where can some of that really start to drive business influence beyond just a data warehouse?
Yeah, it's a great question, Nick. I think, I'll take it from a slightly different angle. What I think is fascinating and hidden in this question is the ability for all of our storage admins, right? All the bread and butter people who sit at keyboards and maintain storage and are infrastructure architects to start to connect up the ladder to data infrastructure engineers, whether they want to do that for a living or whether they just want to be able to fulfill that role and talk to that role. And there's kind of this chasm sometimes between the data scientist and the infrastructure engineer, right? And we're not claiming you're going to be all things to all people, but imagine if all of a sudden to your data scientist, you can be the keeper of data collections, right? So that you can, instead of just being able to talk about, hey, I got a LUN for you, or I got an NFS share for you, you can say, hey, I've got this clinical AI, I've got this clinical data about healthcare, a healthcare trial, and it's available as a constantly dynamically updated collection. Here's your API, right? You've transformed from a storage admin to being a data admin, right? Or being a data engineer. And that's huge. I mean, the ramifications of that for what our customers are going to be able to do, for what the industry is going to be able to do, and transform into being, true data infrastructure engineers is just astonishing.
Yeah, and I look at that. That's a great point. Like the ability to deliver a service to your end users instead of just a dumb volume, for example.
Right.
Being able to extend the capabilities of ONTAP up to the people that are going to be using it on a day-to-day basis. It also, in the inverse of what you said, it makes them not have to be storage engineers.
Yeah.
And I think that's arguably more valuable than the storage engineers of today. We saw that a lot with movements like virtualization and things like that, extending that self-service nature for app developers, for example, to be able to spin up their own test VMs and do unit testing in batches and stuff like that. So I think this is the level of automation that we're going to see around leveraging the AI that is built under the covers. We've heard this story before. Anybody that's been in the industry for the last couple of decades, it feels like deja vu a little bit. We've done this with cloud. We've done this with virtualization. We did it with client server to an extent around Y2K. So it's a familiar story, but the immense gravity of the size of this effort, working in hundreds of potentially petabytes of data long term. And does this, one last question I'll throw at you, does this keep us even more so storing more and more data long term? And not, how do we deal with archiving when it comes to this stuff? I guess is a loose question that just popped into my mind.
Yeah,
because
it's a great question.
We try to tear some of that stuff off.
Yeah.
We try to we want to shove it in a cold, dark hole so that we can just not have to worry about it. But that's arguably some of the most valuable historical data that you have access to. Why not leverage it? So does that mean more long-term data is going to be stored on active systems?
I think not necessarily, right? Because I think once you have the metadata captured and you've done the vector embeddings for that data, right, what it will cause is vector databases to continue to grow and grow and grow with data. And that's why some of the things we're going to talk about making vector databases more and more efficient are going to be important. But the data itself can be kept on cooler and cooler and cooler storage. It doesn't need to be constantly analyzed if you have this metadata namespace. So I think there will be some longevity of data for sure, but I think one of the things we've always been committed to is making sure the data is in the right place at the right time at the right cost, right? You've probably heard that from NetApp a lot. Nothing about AI fundamentally changes that. It just means that the value of that data increases, right? And I would add, by the way, Nick, just as you were talking, it really is. It's almost like it was planned, this 30 years of NetApp, right? And this is kind of what you were saying, right? In terms of, first we unified sort of protocols, right? First we unified NFS and CIFS, then we unified NAS and SAN, right? Then we unified it out to the cloud, right? And every step we've taken to that is so that you can create a data estate that is all of your data. And unless we had done all that 30 years worth of work, we wouldn't be able to build a metadata catalog. We wouldn't be able to present all this data with AI. So I'd love to say it was all part of some master plan from Dave Hitz 30 years ago, right? I'm sure some of it was in his head. There's also a better lucky than good sometimes, right? But everything we did was based on the idea of let's make it easier for users to centralize, collapse, and unify their data. And that is ideally suited to when you want to take advantage of it with AI.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think this just plays into our strengths.
Yes.
And arguably punishes the weakness of some of the others that are out there, if I'm being honest, because this has been our bread and butter, the multi-protocol, unified, one system to rule them all kind of approach, now in large multi-node clusters and now in multi-site metadata warehouses. You can get really scalable with this kind of a solution. And it really rewards that unification when you do it right, when you take advantage of a lot of the things that ONTAP has to offer. So I'm excited about it. I think this is going to be a fantastic way that we can bring all of this stuff together specifically for AI. And I'm looking at this through the lens of the practitioners. One of the questions that always come up, how do we back up AI? And this is one that has come up recently, and I think I sent it over to you specifically. This one caught me by surprise in the sense that, do we continue to leverage the Flex and SnapWord foundational elements of ONTAP to even continue to carry backups into artificial intelligence? I'm just, as a seasoned veteran of ONTAP yourself, how do you see that playing out long term?
So I'll say two things. One is, our goal is to bring a lot of what Krish calls ONTAP-isms, right? So things like SnapDiff and other things like that, to bring them into the AI fold. And the second thing I'll say is stay tuned for day 2.
Stay tuned for day 2. All right. You heard it there first. Any other closing final thoughts you'd like to leave with the audience that they might be on the lookout for?
I'm so pleased to be back here. I know this is our second year back at Insight. It continues to grow. Thank you to everyone who's attending. You can see so many of them behind us, right, filling up the festival grounds here as they stream out of the keynote. It's just fabulous to be around the community, and it's fabulous to have the people listening, on the show as well. And it's a great feeling to be part of the community. And I want to thank you for my Discord pin as well. Since
I've been you a Discord pin.
Well, Drew gave me a Discord pin.
Well, we'll have to talk.
I've been on Discord for a long time.
You do, but did he give you your special role?
I don't. I think he gave me my special role at some point.
As long as he did.
Okay.
We did have one question come in here for you from community mentor Darth Vikes. He's been around for a minute. It seems like S3 buckets along with metadata perhaps in S3 can unlock some of that accessibility with APIs. Just need more tooling to input that metadata. That's a really good point. Where does object start to come into play with some of the other things that we were talking about?
Yeah.
So we can certainly talk about the unified nature of file and block.
Yep.
But when you bring object into the mix, that's where people, especially disparate user groups, have started stuffing data into these S3 buckets over the last decade. That's going to become a really big player, I think, in this unified story. Where do you sit with object storage and its effect on this?
No, 100%. I mean, one of the things Chris said in his pitch was when we build this global metadata namespace, he actually slipped there and there, ONTAP and storage grid, right? So the idea to bring an object. Now, certainly, as object sources are available elsewhere, we could look at, how do we add those into the metadata environment. But yeah, the goal is to be able to leverage data and metadata wherever it lies, right? So both, unstructured data, object data as being a key part of that, and then to some extent also structured data where we can get access into the structures of the underlying data. So everything is, for us, no data is out of limits, basically, right? We want to have that as part of the overall namespace so that we can use it to feed the AI engine.
Yeah, and we can do that in the cloud. We can do that on-prem. We can
do that
that
everywhere.
In storage grid. We can do that.
Probably do that in an RV loaded with a whole bunch of FAS systems.
I want to drive that RV.
I know you do. I'm surprised you don't have that RV already.
I want one of those fifth-wheel toy haulers with a data center in the back.
I like it.
That's basically what I want
pretty
to be.
much.
Data center dude RV.
Data center dude on the road, right? There you go.
There we go.
I branded it.
That's next year's snapshot.
I get a certain percentage of the profits from that, right?
You heard it here first, guys.
There we go.
Jeff, one last question for you. What's your favorite part?
This is the third one last question, by the way. I'm keeping track. Okay.
One last thing.
Okay.
Well, then we'll get to our next guest. What's your favorite part of the community?
Oh.
On the spot. I got to ask
My favorite part of the community? You mean like the online community or just this community and everything like that?
Just in general. Like, where do you find value personally in, like, as a product leader to an extent, like, there's a certain value to feedback that you can get from the community, obviously, but like I'm asking on a personal level, like what do you get out of it? I
don't like to play favorites, but since I saw Sam Moulton just walk by, I'm going to call it the A-Team, right?
Okay.
I am the executive sponsor of the A-Team. The A-Team, what I love about the A-Team is it's open, it's democratic, right? It's not just about being, are you a NetApp employee or a NetApp partner? Are you a customer? It's about, do you have a passion for what we can do for our customers, right? And so I have great friends there. I've made relationships that I maintain even outside of work there. And it's that, it's what makes you want to keep doing this job for 16 plus years is the people and the friendships. I feel like I'm a movie trailer. It's the friendships I made along the way, Nick, right? But that, I love all the communities we have of interest, Discord, people on Reddit, our NTAB groups, our CSAB groups, our PSAB groups, acronym, by the way, that's our customer advisory boards, our partner advisory boards, our technical advisory boards. All the input is incredibly valuable. And then the A-Team for me is just kind of a summation of a lot of really cool nerds hanging out and seeing what we could do for customers.
We had a lot of them at the community party last night.
A ton of them at the community party.
Time.
Was the community party supposed to be the answer there?
Was it supposed to be what?
To your question, was the community party supposed to be the answer to your question?
No, but I'll allow it.
Okay, good. Well, then the community party, I hear, was amazing. I was locked in a room doing rehearsals for keynotes, but I hear it was amazing.
It was amazing.
It was amazing, yes.
Well over 300 people came through, and it was absolutely beautiful. So, again, thank you to everybody for coming out and joining us. Jeff, thank you so much for your time today. I'll let you get back to the show and go walk around and have a drink and mingle. But appreciate you stopping by. Thanks for saying hi to the community with us, and I'm sure we'll see you sometime in the near future.
Yeah,
right?
For sure.
All right.
Okay, thanks, Nick.
You got it. All right, guys. Well, that is Mr. Jeff Baxter. Thanks, Jeff, for joining us. Really appreciate it. Some really insightful stuff to talk about when it comes to artificial intelligence and how we're really handling that, especially from a product standpoint, and how we view the way that the market is kind of steering how we're looking at it and how we're thinking about it. So at the end of the day, that's what we really listen to. All of your feedback, all of our customers, you play a big part in how we do this stuff going forward. So everything that you just heard Jeff talk about, everything you heard George and all of our guests talk about on stage during the day one keynote, that all plays a factor in how we deliver a lot of this stuff to the market. And he did mention on his way out the NetApp A-Team. And so our next guest that I'm going to bring up on the show has been a long time NetApp A-Team member. He's one of my favorite people, and I just moved my mic. That's fun. Mr. John Woodall. John, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining us.
Man, thank you. What a great first day keynote.
No kidding.
I mean, I've heard a lot of them as you longtime NetApp partner, longtime NetApp A-Team member. Great stuff. I can't wait for day 2.
Oh yeah.
Well, so good.
I can't spoil anything.
They teased us.
They did a little dangle, little carrot dangle out there.
I want the meal.
Yeah. We're ready to feast.
That's
right. For sure. Today the theme is AI.
Yes.
Everything that George talked about, everything that Chris mentioned, everything that the customers and partner guests mentioned, AI all the time. And I think there's a point to that. And I want to see if you
AI
feel
important. Is that a thing?
It's got something to do with data.
Yeah, it's something.
So there's. There's this theme developing that I've heard play out several times before. It happened with cloud.
Yep.
It happened with, you could go back to the convergence of unifying protocols with storage, right?
Yeah.
It's data.
Yes.
And one of the things that I told Jeff at the beginning is no data, no AI.
Yeah, that's right.
So I'm curious to hear your perspective on what's going on in the industry.
Yeah.
How are customers receiving this?
Yeah.
How are people taking it up? Is there resistance to it? I'm just kind of give me your general thoughts around things, Riley. State of the Union.
I mean, if you're like me, I can't go probably an hour a day without seeing something pop up somewhere in all the feeds that I have on AI. And everyone's focused on these hero numbers, what we hear at GTC, XAI, X, and so on. And that's right. But George alluded to it. It's the largest companies in the world that are doing it.
Yeah.
And I think there's a continuum for customers. The bulk of customers are somewhere on this journey. And if you use, there's a partner here that uses this model, AI curious, AI ready, AI mature.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay.
Right. And I've talked to people across the spectrum. The ones that are on maybe their second, third, whatever generation of DGX infrastructure, they've built models, they have staff, they know what they're doing, they have the tooling. That's similar to a lot of the enterprise deals you do for standard applications. There's sizing, there's availability discussions, and they're trying to get in the queue for H100s and 200s. At the other end of the spectrum, people know this is important.
Yeah.
2032, $16 trillion is the economic benefit that's forecast from AI.
Wow.
Right? 20% increase in the U.S. GDP. There's real business value, and people have latched on to that. iPhone 16 announced, iOS 18 will in the next release, AI built in. So people are becoming very comfortable with using it, but in the enterprise, it's not just as like, let me just fire up ChatGPT.
Right.
They want to go build something of value to their business, get a return on their investment.
Yep.
And so if you start from the people that are just starting and curious, and now they're ready, what I heard today, and it's just such a nice segue of what's next with NetApp, is the data. I hadn't heard the statistic George used. 80% of the time is spent on data prep, cleaning, dedupe, and all of that. Curation of the data.
Yep.
It's a staggering number.
Yep.
Large language model failure rates during AI training runs, 56%.
We got a little ways to go.
So, like cloud, when it first hit, there's a lot of learning curve. And I think that's where most people are at in the industry, is figuring out where do they start, what do they do, and how should they envision their return on their investment. The technology does matter.
Yeah.
And what I heard today is kind of mind-blowing. I wish I could pop up the emoji with the head going off, because what NetApp provides in de-siloing, just around the data itself, Explorer, be able to go in and by policy identify compliant data, PII, and make sure that your inferencing is getting only the data that you want. To do that without NetApp is multiple solutions, complexity, and cost. You're a NetApp customer, you get it. It's incredible value and simplifies the discussion.
Yeah.
We'll hear more about platforms, we always do. But, I think you find people along this continuum, and the challenge is to meet them where they are and help them progress as makes sense.
Yeah.
And that's just the highest level view, but I think it's a realistic view of where customers are. Some are there and love having those customers. They spend a lot of money, right?
Well, they're probably also very good stewards of all their data.
They've
and have
gone
spent
through
the
that.
time over the decades curating it properly, archiving it properly, preparing it for whenever this day would come.
Yeah.
And I think there's going to be a start. Listen, anytime we have a new technology vector arrive, there's two things that always come up: technical debt and skills gaps. And I think
You're
AI
not talking about VMware, are you?
Not at all. Or cloud. Not at all.
Yeah.
So I think we're going to see that yet again, and that's going to be something that every institution, every company is going to have to deal with. Every CIO and IT director out there at the foundational levels are going to have to deal with that to some extent. But I think there are ways that ONTAP can help make this easier.
Absolutely.
It's one of the things I was just talking about with Mr. Baxter a second ago. ONTAP makes this easier by doing a lot of that heavy lifting for you, so that you can get on about, and then you just end up accessing an API.
Well, and I'll go back to the silo concept. You look at the average enterprise, they have multiple storage platforms for any number of reasons. Some make sense, some I don't think do. When you start thinking about the amount of data, having the tools that NetApp provides through the Blue XP interface, the tools that have been in ONTAP for a really long time, the autonomous ransomware detection, prevention, and recovery tooling, keeping that data safe from bad actors. There's a lot there.
Yeah.
You don't have to look further. And so I have two guiding principles I like to think of with customers. Optimize everywhere, modernize everything. You typically have to do it on budget cycles or from a project cycle, but you have to have that end state in mind of how do I simplify the infrastructure? And I love that George referenced the data fabric from when that started.
Love it.
Because we've been extending the network and VMs for years. But until you extend not just the storage, but the data management and the data services that go with it, the platform around
it's
the
the
data.
metadata layer on top of it.
All of that. When you can extend that to wherever you need to that makes sense for your business, now you've truly created a full data fabric. Now you lay on top of that an AI workload. Being able to take it from, taking good care of your data, cleaning, prepping, all of those steps, having the same storage, having multiple tiers of performance and cost, being able to tier, being able to take a snapshot, flex clone it, and have a set of developers start a regression cycle off of a gold standard for almost no space in very quick time. Don't move data if you don't have to. It's expensive.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things that are inherent to the NetApp platform. It's not a storage device. It's a platform that enable efficiency and flexibility. Anyone else, they might do the storage piece, but then you have to add in additional solutions to make a complete platform around your data. NetApp has provided that, and what I heard George commit to today, the best one, bar none, down the road.
Yeah.
And so the journey continues. I've been watching it from, I heard you and Jeff talking about the unification, 2002, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, we got files. Now we got file and SAN, right? And then the cloud virtualization hit, and then the cloud took off, now multi-cloud. And now I find ourselves in the era of data and AI and intelligence. And the value proposition has never been stronger. And I would say simplify with NetApp around the data platform. Leverage the ecosystem that you already invest in with NVIDIA, with Cisco and others around the rest of the stack. Automate heavily, think of infrastructure as code. A lot of this, I'm still thinking through Explorer.
It looks amazing.
I went, we need to learn more on this.
So let's so we can't talk about industry trends with AI without talking about sustainability. I'm going to throw you a little bit of a curveball because I think a lot of this plays into that argument as well when it comes to sustainability. When you can unify, you're reducing footprint, you're reducing floor tile space, power consumption, cabling needs, all of the above. Density
of your storage. It's going to be flash for AI. Let's just not fool around. We can tier differently, but flash is going to be TLC or QLC flash. C-Series is a great fit. Well, that's going to continue, getting better and denser. Blue XP gives you your actual, not spec data, but what your actual consumption is, and guided steps to improve your scores.
Yeah.
It's something that every public company in the U.S. has to deal with. I heard Elon Musk in an interview with Bosch earlier this year, and they were talking about scaling in AI. And he's one of the few that have a really good view of it. There were 3 things he highlighted. The 10x growth of performance that we're seeing from NVIDIA in every 6 months won't continue forever. The next thing is step-down transformers.
Yeah.
Then it's the power grid.
Yep.
And so you can change, your individual company's scores by going to a more efficient data center. Pick a colo, pick a cloud. But beyond that, things have to change. Will we see large language models pervasively? No. Will we see small language models? A lot more.
Yes.
Well, that reduces the infrastructure footprint and cost. So I think there's going to be, just like with cloud, we saw a lot of learning over the first few years as we figured out what was the best practice. Some things didn't exist. We had to find new innovation. That all came in. It's like going to the moon with John F. Kennedy's famous speech. We're going to do this. No, we're going to do this. And this is one of those moments in tech.
Well, fun question to throw at you with that. What do you think of Microsoft buying and firing up 3 Mile Island? You heard about that?
Yeah, I did.
Is that what it's going to take to do all this AI,
Bill
John?
Gates and others are doing startups for small nuclear.
Yeah.
If you figure the U.S. Navy can safely run nuclear submarines for how many decades?
Yeah.
Why can't you have a nuclear something right next to your data center? There's some startups in that space that are really interesting around creating, it's material science and no moving parts, creating an environment where solar radiation will heat these blocks in a container.
Oh, wow.
To like a really high thousands of degrees temperature, but through heat transfer they can generate megawatts of power.
Yep.
And it's clean.
Yep.
So again, these are just some of the innovations and efficiencies that have to happen, because if the enterprise everybody wants to run a GPU accelerated compute environment, the grid's not going to support it.
I have one of those at home.
Yeah. Do tell.
It's an RTX video card. It's not a full stack of H100s. Okay.
But it heats the house in the winter, right?
Yeah, it does. It does actually, which doesn't turn out to be power efficient at all. I've come to find out. No, because natural gas is much cheaper. No, I look at this as, I think one of your points, I think there is an opportunity for innovation in nuclear to the point that we could scale it down to the point where, I don't know, I'll say something crazy. Could you have a small fusion reactor in your garage? In every home? Like, I think we could get it to that point 10, 20 years out from now.
If you're not thinking 3 Mile Island scale. I'm not doing the metropolitan area. When solar took off, we've all got the experience of ourselves, our friends who are off the grid. They make a little money. Tesla has that in their Powerwall business. No plug for it. I think there is an opportunity for at least the enterprise or commercial real estate, colo providers, et cetera, to look at multiple new power sources that are more green. But yeah, we've got to figure out how to supply power to this. That will be a gating item.
Yeah.
Yeah, because a lot of the discussions, especially at the mature end of that scale I was referring to. Okay, let's be honest. A superpod is over a megawatt of power.
Wow.
Right?
Wow.
Yeah, I can cable it. I can design my data center because the design engineering is different for that type of scale for GPU compute. Do I have enough power?
Probably.
Yeah, I mean, some do, some don't.
Some don't. Yeah.
I mean, Meta's talking about 600,000 GPUs.
Yeah, and no amount of windmills is going to generate that much power for us.
So we have to have something that's got a lot of power generation capability that we don't have today. I think we'll go fine for a while, but when the enterprise, and this is what Gartner talks about, 2023, early 24 was the peak of enlightenment on their hype curve for generative AI. Now we're in the trough of disillusionment, where we're trying to figure out supply chain, power, what's happening in the software side, the model side, and to get to the business results. And then the next step is, the spend starts. But it's going to be the enterprise, not just the Fortune 100, if you will.
Yeah.
And if we can't solve some of these problems,
Yeah. Well, John, thank you so much for
My
the time.
pleasure.
I really appreciate it. I love this conversation.
Yeah.
I think that you can't have the AI conversation without having the data conversation, without having the sustainability conversation.
Exactly.
I think it's all encompassing when you have to do that kind of stuff. And I think one of the practical things that we're going to see come out of all of this innovation around AI is I think it's going to breed some innovation around sustainability. I think we're truly going to crack that egg and figure out how to really do sustainable power long term because of it.
Yeah, it becomes a completely holistic discussion, just got larger.
Yeah.
Right, so great talking with you, Nick.
Thank you so much, John. I really appreciate it, man.
My pleasure.
Take care.
See you later.
All right, guys, that was a really good conversation. I hope you guys enjoyed that one. I think we could talk about sustainability for a long time. Hint, hint, we are going to. Coming very soon, I think in the coming weeks after Insight, we are going to have some very special guests coming on talking about sustainability, because I really think that's a under-discussed topic when it comes to, especially when it comes to things around AI and the sheer amount of power that it's going to take to drive that going forward. So, again, thanks to John. Wanted to shout out to the A-team as well for joining us here on the show today. My next guest is one of the senior directors here at NetApp. He covers AI, virtualization, many other things, the solutions for them. Mr. Russell Fishman. Russell, thanks for joining, man.
Nick, pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Well, I mean, listen, I can hear you just about. It's a bit loud in here, but that's not a bad thing, is it?
Oh, that's what we wanted. It's a party in here. If you look behind us, there are thousands of people that have come down onto the expo at this point.
A bunch of techies, good food. I saw a sushi burrito earlier, wine pouring. What more could you ask for?
A great keynote.
A great keynote.
Preceded by a great
it?
keynote. I thought the conversation with, I really liked Chris's presentation.
Yeah.
Because I'm a technical guy. But I really liked the way he navigated that story of how you can use classification and really bring this data curation story to life. Yeah. I'm curious to get your thoughts on this as well, because how do we get, from a solutions standpoint, how do we take the ONTAP as a product, as a data storage juggernaut, and then wrap solutions around that to enable a lot of the things that Chris was describing?
Yeah, it's a great question. You know, as you know, we've been doing this AI thing for many years, right?
Yeah.
So I think probably 7 years.
In 2016, that ONTAP AI launched.
And listen, we've got hundreds of customers that run us in production for AI use cases. And what does that really mean? Well, look, we don't just expect people to take our products and just kind of throw them in and hope for the best. We help them, right?
Yeah.
We give them prescriptive guidance on how to get the most out of the stuff. We don't want people kind of guessing. We want people getting the right answer. And so that's really where our relationship with NVIDIA started. So take it back, 7 years, and, NVIDIA was, as a pioneer, had recognized really early that, data and storage is really important to their mission. Data's the fuel. We like to say data's the fuel that drives the AI engine.
Right.
I know, bit cheesy. I'm sorry about that. But you get the general gist, right?
Yeah.
So we started investing really early with them, building these sort of these reference architectures. And it started off really as an infrastructure thing, right? How do I build infrastructure that kind of works well together? I don't have to guess. It's just you put it together, and you know what? We've given you prescriptive guidance on how to get it working really well. So that's where it all started. But then, of course, what does infrastructure do by itself? Well, a whole bunch of nothing. Right? You got to build applications on it.
Yeah.
So we started building applications on it. And so we've got this amazingly rich set of applications and ecosystem partners that let us deliver something that's meaningful to a customer. Outcomes, right?
Outcomes.
Not just stuff. Outcomes. Business outcomes. So, I thought Chris did a really good job talking that through, and also painting a bit of a vision for NetApp's part in the future of AI, right? And I'll tell you one thing, I'm clear. NetApp is not the AI company, but we're an accelerant for AI. We make it happen. And you know what? Without folks like us, it really becomes very difficult to make AI a reality.
Well, one of the things that I've told your two predecessors that sat in that chair beforehand was, I have a phrase that I like to throw around: no data, no AI.
Yeah.
So it really becomes that foundational building block that you have to have, and then you have to layer on top of it that layer of curation to be able to take advantage of that. But even then, above and beyond that, you have to build these prescriptive solutions,
yes,
at least to an extent prescriptive,
yes,
that can take advantage of all of that other work that you've already spent the last couple of decades doing.
That's right.
Right? But if you haven't taken the time to do that work, if you haven't gone through that, fret not. ONTAP is here to help. Data classification is now free, right? In case you didn't hear that, data classification in Blue XP is now free to all NetApp customers. So turn it on, get it working for you, get it going in your favor, because some of the solutions that we're bringing to market will take advantage of that classification in a very big way.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. Listen, I mean, so you said the phrase, hey, there's no data, no AI, and that is true. But you know what's also true? Good quality data.
Yeah.
Right? And the reality is that folks don't really think through that, right? But you know what? If you don't feed like a retrieval augmented generation Gen AI solution the right sort of data, it doesn't know what's good data. It doesn't know what to answer.
Right.
It sees 2 bits of conflicting information. There's no idea. It's giving you the wrong answer. And you know, if you talk about the difference between folks trying out this stuff in a POC context and then putting it into production, especially in, you know, we were talking in the keynote about these regulated industries, things like finance, healthcare, et cetera, where you know what? The wrong answer matters.
Yeah.
Right? And there was actually, I'll give you a good example. There was, I won't say the airline, I'll spare blushes, right?
Yeah.
But there is an airline, an American airline, that had started using generative AI for customer service use cases. Makes total sense. It's, you know, it's good for a consumer that I can immediately go talk to someone that has the power to do something, even if it's it's a chatbot. But it doesn't matter. If it answers my question and gets me on my way quicker than waiting 45 minutes on hold, hey, man, that's good, right?
No brainer.
Here's the problem. What happens when it gets it wrong? So this consumer had asked a question about, hey, listen, if I cancel this trip under this set of circumstances, what is going to happen? And the answer, he actually asked, will I get a refund? And you know what? The chatbot said, yeah, you will get a refund. He goes, great. He cancelled. No refund. That's weird, right? So he's like, so eventually he gets to talk to a human. The human goes, no. The chatbot gave you the wrong answer, but sorry, that's our policy. He went, He took him to court. He took him to small claims court, and he won.
Yeah.
So here's the answer, right? The chatbot was an official agent of the company, and there's no excuse of, oh, it made a mistake. Well, guess what? It made a mistake, but it was an official agent of the company. That person took action based on what that agent said, that chatbot said. And that guy won and got his money from this big corporation. These are some of the real world challenges that people have. So you know what? In that case, that data that was fed into that RAG environment was wrong.
Yeah.
It had conflicting information. The RAG doesn't know any better. It got an old policy. That policy was out of date like 10 years ago, but someone fed it in. You know what? If you don't curate the data, if you don't understand quality, this has real business impact.
Yeah, you have to be stewards. You have to be librarians, for lack of a better word, of everything that you're putting together in your data estate.
Yes.
And I hear data lake and data warehouse and all these things. I think it's an estate. I think that's the word I like to use, because it's going to transcend storage systems and clouds and all this stuff. You have to look at it holistically as an estate.
Yeah.
And individual components are going to be bigger than others, and they're going to have different metadata, and they're going to have different curation teams and practices and stuff. There has to be a level of at least connective tissue or standardization around how you're doing all the metadata and all of that stuff. Guys, this stuff is fundamental. You have, if you're managing storage, you're managing data, you should have been doing this stuff already, but if you haven't, don't worry about it. ONTAP's going to help. We're going to help you take care of that. What was the other thing I wanted to bring up with you? I always throw around the phrase ONTAP everywhere.
Yeah.
From a solution standpoint, what does that mean to the end users? The fact that they can have the same flex and snap words, the same solution architectures, regardless of whether they're on-prem, in the cloud, at an edge, it's still ONTAP at the end of the day. All the APIs are the same. All the Terraform is the same. All of that stuff.
Yeah.
Where do you see that playing out in the solutions side of the world? Especially when we start looking at AI, for example.
I mean, look, you know, it's great to I've been worked at NetApp for now almost 10 years, and it's just great to be at a company that's just so far ahead of the rest. I mean, okay, I'm going to say that. I get my paycheck from NetApp every month. But here's the reality, right? we are the only company that has this single operating system that sits everywhere, right? It sits in the cloud, it sits in all three hyperscalers, it comes through all these different form factors on-prem, and you heard other things that were being announced today, or kind of previewed, I should say, that they're going to talk more about in tomorrow's keynote. And by the way, if folks aren't tune in for tomorrow's keynote. It's going to be awesome. There's going to be so much amazing stuff. You're going to hear much more detail than you heard today. You heard kind of some tidbits, like breadcrumbs, maybe you'd say. But you're going to hear you're going to a little nuance. So you're going to hear a load more about it tomorrow. But look, what ONTAP Everywhere does is helps our customers in ways that no one else can really help them, because what it does is it recognizes that data isn't in one place neatly tied up in a bow. We all know this. Your data's kind of everywhere, despite our best efforts, right? The reality is data's everywhere. Now, here's the interesting thing. There was obviously a huge push in the industry to kind of consolidate data into data lakes and data lake houses and warehouses and all the other versions of that that you've heard over the years. And there were some big ones like Hadoop. We all remember Hadoop. Hey, by the way, Hadoop is dead, in case you didn't know, right? I mean, I'm not the first.
You heard it here first, folks.
You're not the first man to say that, but Hadoop is definitely dead, right? I hear that a lot, by the way, from our customers. The reality is the types of data we're using for some of these new advances in AI, Nick, are not the same types of data, right? It's actually it's going after data that you probably didn't have in your data lakehouse before, and didn't make sense for a data lakehouse, right? So what we're seeing is, with all this kind of unstructured, especially file data, which is driving this kind of next generation of RAG. How do you manage that? How do you control it? So it's everywhere, right? So that's already difficult, right? And we also, you may have heard during the keynote today, just this idea of how many times data is copied, because you know what, all these different tools, all these different parts of the AI pipeline process, etc. Wouldn't it be great if, you could simplify that by having one place to run all of your applications out of with the same corpus. There's another word for you, corpus.
Oh, there we go.
Corpus, you know that? Yeah, Latin.
Yeah, I like that.
Body. Yeah? Corpus of data, right? Wouldn't it be great? And you know what? We can do that. Now, listen, it doesn't mean all the data's in the same place. So what happens if it's in the cloud? Well, guess what? A singular control plane and a consistent data plane. That's what NetApp can do super, super uniquely. And you heard, obviously, today from Microsoft and from AWS. I'm sure we'll hear Google at some point. But the point is, we're the only ones that have that in each of the hyperscalers. And unlike others where, you're talking about marketplace services, you're talking about first-party data services based on ONTAP, that it's getting directly integrated. You heard today from AWS about the integration with Bedrock, where they're directly integrating our ONTAP services into the first-party services. So whatever you do, whether your data's on-prem or the cloud, wherever your AI needs to be, right? Is it on-prem? Is it cloud? You know what? In reality, for most of us, it's hybrid. We can help people. So look, our job for our viewers here and listeners, right? It's all going to be about how they can become AI champions in their organizations, right? And when I think about a champion, I'm thinking about an enabler, right? So most people in our business don't necessarily think of themselves as the people that are pushing AI. They kind of feel a bit reactive. You may even be perceived as someone that's holding back in AI innovation. The early parts of AI were sort of, I would say characterized by boards going to AI practitioners and lines of business saying, hey, here's money, just go do it. And by the way, ignore IT.
Yeah, go build me an AI.
Yeah, just go that build. Means. Don't worry about IT. They're going to slow you the hell down. So that's where it all started. But you know what? The reality is that people have started moving to production for these things.
Yeah.
The horror, the realization.
Like the chatbot example you gave,
the
right?
horror, the realization of the impact, and also not being funny. What happens when it goes wrong at 3 a.m. in the morning on a Saturday? Who are they going to call?
Yeah.
You could call Ghostbusters.
One of the things that George brought up during the keynote was access to tools, access to things like that.
Right.
I think that's going to play a big part.
Yeah.
The democratization, if you will, of AI to give more people. It's not going to be some crazy specialty. The fact that, and we saw Satya say something similar in his video, that I think the access to the tools and the AIs that are out there, regardless of where they're built, is really going to be foundational as well for a lot of these companies to kind of take a first dip a toe in the water and get used to it before they go in and full on build a RAG environment for all their data ever. Like, they can get comfortable with it, get used to it, eliminate some of that technical debt and skills gap stuff. just so they get comfortable with it. But I can't wait till 5 years from now to see what some of our largest customers, their RAG environments that they've put together using petabytes and petabytes of their own data, may have even more powerful AIs than some of the consumer level ones that are out there now.
Well, they'll be more useful, right?
Yeah.
Because they're going to
for
be
them specifically.
good for them specifically. So you're going to see a lot more sort of verticalization than you've ever seen before. But yeah, look, I would tend to agree with you. We're just starting on this journey to, that word democratization of AI is probably a little bit overused. We're overusing it now, right? But here's the reality, right? Not every company has the resources or the wherewithal to go and hire a bunch of data scientists, data engineers, if you can find them, which, by the way, you can't. It's funny, I was sitting in my dentist's chair, right? Okay. And I always have a little, you want to have a chat with a dentist, right? Because,
I don't.
You don't?
No, I don't like the dentist.
You want to calm down, right? I like to calm down. So I like to calm down, have a chat with the dentist. He's like talking about his son. He's off to university. He's like, he's kind of, what career should he be? And he's like interested in data and computer science. And it wasn't even, it was easy, data engineer. I was like, man, you are going to walk into a fantastic job straight away. There aren't enough of you. Yeah. You can be prima donnas.
Yeah.
That's the reality, right? You just, you don't like what's happening. You move somewhere else and get more money. No, in all seriousness, look, most of these companies are just going to want to be users, right? They're just going to want to be users or consumers, which means they're not going to be developing. It's kind of like buying Office, Microsoft Office. You don't need to develop Microsoft Office to get the value out of it. So that's where I think, and you're going to hear us talk about that in the next couple of days, right? How do we move from the, hey, AI is accessible to a few few companies that really invested, to being available to everyone.
Yeah.
So listen, I hope that, the folks that are watching live and if you're listening afterwards and get a chance to go back and listen to the recordings, get to listen to the next couple of days, because I tell you what, you're going to walk away with a lot of very practical experience on how you can become a champion in your own organization.
Yeah. Russell, thank you so much for joining us, man. I really appreciate it, and thank you for making time for us, and a great conversation. I absolutely loved it. Look forward to having you back on the show sometime in the future.
Appreciate it, as always. Thanks, Nick.
Well, there we go, guys. Mr. Russell Fishman, he is our Senior Director of Solutions for AI, Virtualization, and many other things. If you've probably interacted with Russell at some point if you've been around NetApp for any period of time. All right, moving right along. We got a lot to go, guys. Don't go anywhere. Keep joining us. If you have questions, make sure you're throwing them in the chat over on YouTube. If you're watching over on netapp.com or insight.netapp.com, come join us over on YouTube so you can ask questions and throw them in there. My next guest is a longtime friend of mine. I'm excited to have him on the show. I'm excited to talk to this dude. Not only do we want to highlight our own employees and our own product leaders here at the company this week, not only do we want to highlight the NetApp A team this week, we also want to highlight arguably one of the most important things that NetApp has, and that's our partners. The companies that are out there putting our products to use, pushing the boundaries of everything we can do with them. And one of my favorites, who I affectionately refer to as the Dub-Dub, WWT, Mr. Derek Elbert. Derek, thanks so much for joining me on the show, man. I really appreciate it.
Hey, Nick, man. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
So what do you do at WWT? Give the folks a quick introduction.
Yeah, so quick intro. I'm a solutions architect at WWT. I sit in the Global Solutions and Architecture Group, so we're a global team that covers the industry from a technology focus, right? We don't focus based on a given region or a given account, but we cover it more on a technology or solution focus. So that's where we sit within WWT. There's about 250 of us that
that's
support
a big team.
A lot of solutions. Yeah.
So as global team, you're
global
covering
team.
Everything.
Yep.
Wow. I guess the thing I want to start off asking with, obviously the theme of today is AI. The keynote was very focused on AI solutions, leveraging NetApp and ONTAP specifically under the covers for some of that data management, the foundational pieces of it. How have you seen ONTAP and NetApp Storage and Solutions really have... let me take a step back for a second. Give me your pulse on what's happening out there from the partner perspective. Like, where are you seeing the uptake happen just in general around AI? Is it still a long ways off, or is it happening today?
So it is happening today, right? And WWT, so this started probably more than 12 months ago. We became an AI-led company, right? And it started with executive leadership initiatives to drive investment in AI, right? And obviously, any space that operates in the high-performance architecture space, right? Think NVIDIA, obviously NetApp has a footprint there.
Yeah.
I think the networking side, that is where we're investing. And with our Advanced Technology Center, we have morphed that into what we call the AI Proving Ground. So you can think of what used to be the Advanced Technology Center. It's still there. People can still use it just like they used to. But now we have taken all of the reference architectures that are sponsored by NVIDIA and put them into an AI-specific playground for our customers to use, right? NetApp has a presence in there with their high-performance storage systems, and we can actually showcase to customers the ability to do AI and do it effectively, right? And
so are these proofs of concept? Are these POCs, or are they more like you're assisting them build theirs?
Yeah, so that's one avenue, right? So proofs of concepts are obviously a huge part of what we do. So we love to bring customers in. We love to give them a place to validate, test, prove out, and then eventually, hopefully, move it into production in their own environments, and we will help them do that. But a piece of the ATC and the AI Proving Ground as well is giving ourselves the knowledge and the rigor and the discipline around how to make AI effective, right? And how to take it from, that pie in the sky to something actually practical, right?
Yeah.
And that's how we voice it at WWT is it's taking the best of, predictive AI or applied AI and generative AI and making it practical, right?
What industries are you seeing take it up the most? Is there a particular vertical that is really like ahead of the curve when it comes to whether it's RAG or whether it's using any kind of Nemo integrations and stuff like that? Is there a particular vertical, an industry that's really taking this by storm?
That's a great question, and there definitely is an uptick, right? So if you look at the service provider landscape, I would say they're the ones furthest ahead, right?
I wouldn't have guessed that. Interesting. Okay.
And alongside them, right, obviously life sciences, pharma, and financial services, right? Those are the three that are further ahead, I would say. More general enterprise, they're still dabbling, right? Trying to figure out what's the strategy look like? How do I do it? There's a lot of initiatives or excitement in the public sector, but the problem that we've seen in public sector is pushing that to the forefront, right? They're a little bit more reserved. They take a little bit more time with implementing the solutions, but they do have a lot of good ideas and they could see a lot of value, right? So,
So what kind of solutions do you see, I guess, is the next question where I wanted to go. With that in mind, what are the predominant ones? So my guess was going to be financial services, market making, things like that, that you can obviously predict that that's probably what financial services companies are going to be using it for. But it can also be predictive in the sense of helping companies project earnings, financial forecasting, things like that really can come into play. I guess what I'm curious is what kind of solutions are you seeing in some of those that are doing it right and running away with it?
Yeah, so I can give you an example. So in financial services specifically, they've all been trying to figure out this fraud detection and fight fraud, right, in some form or fashion. And they've been doing that for a long time, and I think they're still trying to do that. But where we've seen an uptick on the generative AI side is more around enabling their internal workforce to become more efficient, right? And you think about RAG, you think about chatbots, right? But it's about getting your data ready first and making it effective and efficient for the users, right? Whether they're internal users or customers that come to your site, right? So I think the first path in is always going to be some type of chatbot, RAG-based application that you can move forward with. There's very few people out there trying to build, train, or even do a lot of fine-tuning with the models, because there's so many models out there, and the ability to take one of those and implement it into a solution and use something like RAG to ingest your enterprise data is just so much quicker. The time to market is so much better, and you're not spending, countless dollars training and fine-tuning when you can take a model and augment it to fit your domain and make it specific for your end user. So there's another customer where they come to us in the AI Proving Ground, and we're big on making sure you have the right hardware for the right job, right? Or for the right use case. And we've spent a lot of time with the accelerators that we have in the AI Proving Ground, obviously the storage environments that we have in there as well, and the network environments, to do some significant testing around sizing for high-performance architecture, right? So taking into account factors like what model are you going to use? What size is that model going to be? How many users are going to be hitting this? What kind of response times are you looking for? Not just to first token, but also, total response. And all of those things factor into how many accelerators you need and what type of bandwidth you need in order to produce the outcome, right?
Yeah, and that's going to determine number of GPUs, number of CPUs, network architecture, all of that kind of stuff,
100%, 100%, because everybody wants to start small, right? But if you have a 15,000 user base and they're all going to be hitting it at the same time, you might want to start thinking a little bit bigger initially, because you want to have a customer service representative inside your organization able to respond to your customers in a timely manner, right? You don't want them waiting hours or even minutes, right? You want the response from that prompt to be almost instantaneous, right? At least within a few seconds.
So let's do a quick role play exercise. Yeah. I'm a customer and I'm coming to you and I have no idea what I'm talking about. And I say, Dub, I want an AI. How do you start that conversation? What are the things that, before they call you, should they be considering? It's not a point and laugh kind of thing. There's no such thing as a stupid question. We love consulting with customers any chance we get to help them come up with solutions and stuff. But what are some of the key things, maybe lessons learned is a better word, that you've discovered throughout the last 12 months, as you were saying, that some of our viewers could maybe latch onto and go and inspect in their environments?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and I'm glad you asked it, honestly, because the first thing that we start with, right, when you look at it from walking into a customer and actually helping them, consulting them, building the strategy, the first piece of that is data, right? Where's your data? Do you have access to it? What kind of sovereignty and governance and compliance do you need around that data? Have you figured that out? Are there security protocols that you need? So that's the first conversation. And a lot of times, we don't get to have that conversation, but we need to, because if you have bad data, you're going to have bad AI, and applications that use it are going to have a bad experience, right? It's going to be a bad experience. And we're not even talking the responsibility AI component of that around, bias control and ranking and prioritization. That would be the next step after you get your data in order. If you move it a step further, so what we've done is we made an investment and we had executive buy-in, right? And we are big on having center of excellence. That's what we call it. Some people call it a tiger team. We like to call it a center of excellence, and we help position that for our customers, right? Make sure that they have that in place. And the three main points that you need in that room, right, is a product owner or line of business owner, obviously executive buy-in and investment, obviously the data science team and the people that are actually doing the work with the models, and then your IT team, right? Your enterprise team that's going to support the hardware that you're going to buy, or even the platforms that you're looking to deploy in the public cloud. So it takes all of those teams to be in the same room and moving or rowing in the same direction. So that's what we did internally at WWT. So we started with what we call WWT Atom. And that is essentially taking all of the knowledge from the 30-plus years of Worldwide and our Advanced Technology Center, all the documents, all the POCs, all the enterprise data that we hold, and pumping it into a RAG-based application architecture, funneling all that data, and building our own internal employee experience chatbot that our sales teams and up to 6,000 users today can use. Now, that process has been an iterative process, meaning that we didn't just push it to production and move on. we continually go through the data curation process to make sure that we are chunking the data properly, that we are embedding it properly, we're using the right embedding model. We ensure that the prioritization and ranking, and there's always a human in the loop aspect of this, and we're constantly feeding that data, and data is pumped through that pipeline every night, right? Like, we are constantly updating that pipeline. And what we've done with that is now we're taking it, and I think a key and where customers need to be in order to see ROI is they need to make AI a system of systems, and meaning it needs to be embedded into every application. So start with a fundamental component. Let's say it's a RAG-based application or architecture. Use that data pipeline, but then start feeding it and spreading it into all of your other internal tools or customer-facing tools. So we took what we did with Adam, and now we have launched an RFP assistant tool. And it's all based off the same fundamental data pipeline. We are just enabling a new set of users and a new functionality for the front end, but using the same methodology, right? So, like I said, it's iterative and we are getting better at it, but it's not every customer is the same. Like, I hate to say every customer is a snowflake, but if your data isn't, no customer data is the same, right?
Yeah.
And in order to make it effective, you have to use your own data to make it effective and to make it domain specific.
Well, so there you go. Good
if
first
you can't
step.
get that in order, then...
And it goes back to the thing, guys, you guys are going to get tired of hearing me say it eventually. No data, no AI. So if you're not curating your data properly, if you're not taking care of it, if you're not indexing it and doing all of the things, inferencing all of your images, doing all of that stuff. Like, we've recently turned on Doc, our chatbot, DocBot, I think they're calling him, basically for our ONTAP documentation. And we've learned so many things. They've been through so many iterations, just like you said. So, yeah, we're learning just as much as you guys are. We're excited about it. I know you guys are excited about it. But I appreciate you stopping by the show, man.
Yeah.
I'm excited to hang out with you this week.
Yeah,
Looking
I'm
forward to
excited
seeing what
too.
you guys come. Promise me something. Can I come to see the Center of Excellence in the ATC,
For
what you
sure.
were describing earlier?
For
Maybe
sure.
we can do a longer show
Yeah,
there.
we can go through all the lessons that we've learned internally, right?
Awesome.
I do want to say, like, for people that are here at Insight, we have a session specifically on a successful path with AI with WWT tomorrow at 2 p.m.
Nice. And we'll have these available online as well for those guys. If you're watching from home, we'll have these sessions available online for people to watch as well. So, Derek, thank you so much for dropping by, man. I really appreciate you taking the time, and look forward to getting to hang out with you this week, man.
Thanks, Nick. I appreciate it.
All right, take care. All right, guys, moving right along. Woo! Are you guys tired yet? I'm not. I still got to go to a reception after we're done here. We're having a blast. We're having a good time. Moving on to the next one. It's time to get geeky. It's time to get into the gooey, geeky details, because if you've watched me long enough on some of these shows, you know that I am a super hardware geek. I love hardware, and we can't spend a day talking about AI and not talk about hardware. So I had to go get the hardware man himself when it comes to all of our AI solutions. I believe he's been involved with it from the beginning, but we'll verify that in just a second. Mr. Dave Arnette. Dave, thank you so much for joining, man. I've been trying to get you on the show for like a year.
I know, man.
And you're a hard man to get a hold of.
What can I say?
But I really appreciate you making the time for us today.
Yeah, no problem.
We have some things that I want to be delicate about how I say them and how we communicate them. So there are a lot of moving parts when it comes to hardware related to some of our AI solutions. Can you sort of take me down the high level of what that looks like and what those integrations are as far as when it comes to AI and what hardware pieces people need to be considering above and beyond a storage system?
Well, the whole architecture matters, right? The network is critical, the compute systems themselves, right? This is a workload that is entirely compute dependent, and even though we like to sell storage, our role in it is not about delivering storage at that. It's more about managing data.
Yeah.
Right. And so the infrastructure we're talking about, like NVIDIA DGX servers or the equivalents from some of the OEMs, they all kind of offer the same things. NVIDIA doesn't really mind where you buy your GPUs from as long as you buy GPUs. So all the OEMs offer the same things. And then NetApp, we've been working with, like you said, I've been working with NVIDIA since basically NetApp started working on these things.
Was that like ONTAP AI stuff in 2016? I believe is what it was.
2018 was
2018,
the first one we released, so 6 years ago, and that was with the original DGX1 hardware and kind of our existing storage platforms at the time. Things have come a long way since then, right? The servers have come a long way. It's astonishing to me that something as powerful as a DGX1 is basically obsolete now, and they don't even support them anymore. And even though our data scientists are getting a lot of really good use out of the ones we bought back then, we can't get parts for them if they break. So it's kind of hard to work on.
It's kind of like running a modern video game on a 1080 Ti. Like it might run for a minute. But
that's right. Yeah. So. We've been doing a lot of work now. Obviously A100s and H100s is the kind of current generation. Doing a lot of testing. We've got a new storage platform that's come out. Basically delivers twice the performance of an A800. The testing I'm doing is with an A90, and it's basically twice the performance of an A800. And the beautiful part about it, as a hardware geek should appreciate, the A90 is a direct head swap into an A800 chassis, so you don't have to replace disk drives, you don't have to change anything about your configuration. You pull out the controllers, you put new ones in, you're going twice as fast. That's awesome.
So all of you A800 customers out there, I hope you were paying attention, and if you haven't, contact your reps, because that's one of the maybe one of the easiest head swaps we've ever done.
It's amazing to me that it is that easy, right? And unfortunately, the only thing you don't get out of that head swap is the lighted bezel.
I thought we really nailed it with the A700, especially with the A900, where everything was kind of vertically mounted, and you could just pull the controllers out back in.
Yeah.
It got even better. So
I love the new hardware. The new hardware is so awesome.
Yeah.
Every part in it comes out of it without a tool. You can swap, network cards without tools while it's hot. You got to reboot it to get them to recognize, but it's so much easier to work with, and everything is really accessible on the back of the systems. And they're twice as fast as they used to be.
They're screaming crazy.
They're screaming fast, and they're only going to get faster, right? There's a lot of work at ONTAP coming that's going to make that go even better.
So when we've announced some Nemo solutions back at GTC earlier this year. We've had the various AI pod solutions that have come out throughout the year. There's been something else that did it get announced today? Can we talk about it?
Not really.
No, not yet. All right.
Tomorrow.
So
there's some really good stuff coming tomorrow.
There's some stuff coming tomorrow, but I probably should have had him on tomorrow. Maybe you can sneak back over.
I'm happy to come back tomorrow.
But we have some more stuff coming, guys, as far as that's concerned. Where does so you mentioned going over the whole architecture a second ago. What's different about architecting a system for AI versus what you would consider a normal client server or virtualization system when it comes to that? How does it come into effect when you're slapping a DGX in the computer?
Well, at the end of the day, we're talking about some pretty demanding workloads, right? Extremely high read throughput requirements, extremely high write throughput requirements. Excuse me. So we're talking about networking at 100 gig or faster speeds. The new generation of ONTAP hardware supports 200 gig now, and will support 400 gig in a future ONTAP release. It just gets big. It just gets bigger and bigger. Like I said, the network needs to support the kind of connectivity and performance that we're looking for. NetApp, obviously, we're huge on NFS, and with the last couple of versions of ONTAP, we've released a number of features that basically turn ONTAP into a parallel file system.
Yeah.
And so we can deliver really, really massive scale performance now out of the same package, and at the same time do all the data management stuff that actually makes AI a lot easier to do.
Well, you brought up NFS as that. I'm thinking about on the block side, like what some of the advances we've made of NVMe over TCP. Does that have a pretty big? Is that a big difference maker when it comes to these kinds of solutions?
Well, I'll say AI is not a block workload kind of not a block,
big file
not a block
reads and
storage
stuff?
Kind of workload, right?
Okay.
It's basically either it's massively shared file systems, right? So that means either a distributed or parallel file system, or it means something like an NFS server that's capable of delivering that. So we really don't see much in the terms of kind of block protocols. The local devices in the servers are NVMe, and we can use those as a cache if we really need to, but generally our systems are fast enough that we can just run without it.
Kind of plays into our strengths quite a bit.
Straight into
right?
our wheelhouse,
ONTAP tends to love those the file-based protocols the most, right? What was I wrote something down here earlier to talk with you about specifically, and that was the data mobility part. When we talk about building these sorts of pods or these kind of prescribed architectures to be able to do AI and things like that. When you get to mobility, does it become more difficult or less difficult in that sense? Do you have to have like versus like? Is there somewhat, is it, as long as it's on tap, is that good enough?
Well, I'll say as long as it's on tap, it's good enough,
Okay.
right? Like the challenge here is, and this is a thing I say to basically every customer I talk to these days, AI is a data challenge. It's not a performance challenge. It's not, I mean, the performance and the infrastructure are kind of required, but without data, it doesn't happen. It doesn't matter how good the infrastructure is, right? So the flow of data from wherever it's collected or created into a training environment where it can be used to do AI things, or even stashed for doing RAG purposes, right? To actually have relevant data put where it can be accessed for an on-demand type of system. That's a much bigger challenge that our customers are facing than just delivering performance for the GPUs.
Well, it's also a much bigger, different kind of workload than just like standing up 100 VMs or something like that, right? And it's a different kind of architecture, different kind of networking.
Yeah, like I said, we're talking about 100 gig or better networking for storage. We're talking about 400 or 800 gig networking between the servers for GPU to GPU type communication.
Is that all InfiniBand? Like, what's realistically, like, what can deliver that kind of bandwidth at this point?
Well, 800 gig Ethernet is available.
By who?
Mellanox.
Mellanox. Okay, so NVIDIA's doing it. Yeah.
I'll say in the largest scale architectures, InfiniBand is preferred, especially for that east-west communication.
Yeah.
Mainly because InfiniBand is actually architected and engineered to help accelerate those kinds of processes. The things like an all reduce. The Mellanox network can actually do an all reduce in the network before it gets to the server that needs it, so it just streamlines the operations. On the other hand, Mellanox themselves or NVIDIA themselves have demonstrated that their current generation of Ethernet switches is only about 150 nanoseconds slower than an InfiniBand switch, and I don't know many people who can measure 150 nanoseconds in their application stack, right? So that becomes a wash. So, we're all in on Ethernet. I wouldn't argue with the use of InfiniBand for the east-west communication, but certainly for a storage protocol, it makes much more sense, certainly for an enterprise, to use something like NFS that's already in the data center, and maybe we need to upgrade to a 100 gig network, but that's the same technology, just faster.
Well, comparative to an AI hardware solution, it's going to be a negligible cost almost to do that.
Oh yeah,
right?
compared to the GPUs,
compared to all your GPUs,
the networking
and your
and the
CPUs,
storage is a rounding error sometimes.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Dave, I really appreciate it, man. Thank you so much for stopping by. Anything you want to leave other than the teaser for tomorrow?
Well, I get a
commitment? Can you stop back by tomorrow to chat with us?
I will absolutely stop back tomorrow, and
so we can actually talk about it.
One of the things I'll tease is that I did just on Friday. It hasn't really been publicized, but I've released a new version of the reference architecture with this AI90 and some of the performance results and a lot of the configuration details, really to help make it easier. There are some aspects that get a little geeky, and so that's a part of what I do, is make sure that we help customers do it as easy as possible and still get that kind of performance.
Awesome. If you would send that to me, send me a link to it. I'll make sure we blast it out to everybody. All right.
Will do.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Dave. Appreciate it, man. All right, guys. That's going to do it for Dave. Where we got a couple more. Well, we got one more. I believe we've got one more. All right, just checking my notes here. I don't know how to introduce this gentleman properly. It's not that I don't know him. It's that he needs no introduction. This guy is one of the guys that I go way back with. We've both been working here for God knows how long. We've been here for what seems like an eternity. We seem to swim around in the same circles with lots of things. And if you've been anywhere near NetApp in the last, 20 years, you know this man. So welcome to the show, Mr. Matt Watts.
Hey, Nick.
Thank you for joining me, Matt.
It's great to be here.
It's
Thanks
great
for the
to see you
invite.
again, man.
It's been a while. We don't catch up often enough. So
every other year at San Jose, we bump into each other
pretty much
randomly,
like
but yeah.
Which would have meant 19 and a half times, right? Based on my tendency at NetApp, okay?
Right. I've been here since 2011. When did you join?
2005, May 2005.
Man, you got me by 6 years.
No catching up there.
Nobody's catching Gebhardt or any of those other guys at this point, right?
True, yeah.
Matt, I wanted to chat with you here to sort of close out the first day, because today's theme has been all about AI.
Yes.
And I almost want to have kind of a theoretical, philosophical conversation with you here to close out the day rather than something technical.
Okay.
Because I look at this and I say a third of this is technical. 2/3 of this Mount Everest-sized thing that we're about to climb in the industry, and it's going to take, I think, many years to crest and figure out exactly what we can do with this new superpower that we've stumbled over our heels backwards into over the last 2 years.
Yeah.
Where do you land on, obviously we've talked a lot throughout the show today about the technical nature of it, the skills gaps, those sorts of things. But on a philosophical level, is this the right move that companies need to be doing at this time, and why?
Yeah, so that is a great philosophical debate, which I wish I had my glass of wine here. We could really talk it through.
We'll do that later.
Yeah, I mean, look, I mean, I wrote a book recently, and one of the expressions that I kind of use in the book is it's about managing ripples and riding waves.
Yeah.
And, ripples are those kind of things that are just, regular progress of technology. And whilst they're really important, they're just things that we sort of have to deal with. Whereas waves are those kind of moments where you can suddenly create multi-billion-dollar, even trillion-dollar opportunities.
Right.
And I think AI has that potential.
I do too.
I think we're on the very crest of what Gartner would call the peak of inflated expectations. I think people are looking at AI as this special snowflake, this kind of uber technology that's going to, transform the world. It's going to, and I think, that is a use case. There are going to be companies out there that are going to find new drug discoveries. They're going to do some really incredible things. I think the reality is, in the short to medium term, most companies are going to get productivity improvements. And I think that's where we're going to start to see the real use cases is, if I can make your developers 30% more productive, if I can make your marketing teams 20, 30% more productive, what's the impact of that?
Yeah.
So I think that's that sort of, it's the reality, the what do they call it? The plateau of enlightenment, I think Gartner call it, right?
There's the early adopter stuff and then the plateau that you get, right?
So yes, I think the reality is companies, people listening to this, start to think more about what are those kind of productivity use cases, because I think those are going to be some of the short-term wins that are going to have some of the really kind of interesting opportunities and impacts.
I see this through two different lenses, honestly, if I can waffle for a second. I look at this through the lens of the consumer and what we're exposed to on the consumer side, the chat GPTs, the content creation assistants, things like that. I wonder how much of that is going to translate into those same people bringing it into the enterprise or bringing that expectation into the enterprise. I think the more people use and leverage ChatGPT that maybe aren't technicians or technically proficient, I think they're going to bring some of those expectations. We see Microsoft doing it with Copilot in Office. So I think some of the adoption curve stuff is going to happen organically just by virtue of consumers using it openly in the market.
Yeah.
And I think they're going to bring those expectations in, which will drive that level of innovation that will force some IT departments to develop RAG solutions so that they can do the same thing they're doing with Office 365 with their own data, for example, right? And I think that's going to take a couple of years. I think we're already a couple of years into it because we've seen the adoption and the skyrocketing of Copilot and ChatGPT over the last year or so especially. But I think this is really going to take off between the next 5 to 6 years.
Yeah, it's really interesting, to sort of carry on the sort of slightly philosophical debate. I met with a company fairly recently, and we were sort of talking about staffing and where they thought they would need to invest time and money and effort and bring resources in. And I remember the guy saying to me, he said, "We're going to need a lot more programmers for the future." And I said, "I'm not so sure." I said, "I think you're going to need a lot less programmers in the future."
Yeah.
Because they were still thinking about a very traditional kind of, we need developers to write code, we need developers to do this. And I actually think ChatGPT is your developer.
Yeah.
So I think as you say, as we start to embrace these technologies at home, I use, not on NetApp equipment, but I use ChatGPT in my personal life for a whole bunch of different things.
Yeah.
It will be very odd for me to come into work and not be able to do some of those things because I don't have access to that technology. So I think there will be peer pressure, consumer pressure that will force companies to realize
we've seen that before.
We have seen that
Whether
before.
it was bring your own device or remote desktops or whatever it might be.
I mean, hell, if you go back far enough, there were an awful lot of companies that didn't even give you access to the internet.
Yeah.
So you'd go home in the evening, you'd be playing on the internet, you come to work, you had no access. I mean,
you
what
got
was that all about,
your dumb terminal green screen, right?
Exactly.
That's your work, no internet.
So I think you're right. I think as technology becomes more and more pervasive in our personal lives, it creates that expectation of,
why can't I use this at work?
Yeah, and your company also, if you're not careful, your company also starts to look a little bit old-fashioned. If you come into work and you're not able to use some of these technologies, what does that say about you as an organization to a younger generation that you're trying to bring into your company, that for them, these are native technologies that they use every single hour of every single day, right?
Yeah. I love this conversation. This is my favorite one I've had yet, and I'm glad we're sort of closing the day out on it, because I think it's one of the most important.
Yeah.
I think there needs to be that war room that happens in every IT department at every company. You gotta get a stack of pizzas, and you guys gotta get a whiteboard and lock yourselves in a conference room and figure out what it is you want to do with an AI.
Yeah.
Not just say we need an AI.
Yeah. Well, otherwise we're in danger of repeating the 2000s, the
Exactly.
.com. Everybody needs to be on the internet. Everybody needs a website. Everybody needs this. And I remember living through that. I am that old, right?
Yes.
But I remember as we kind of got towards the .com boom, people were just buying huge amounts of equipment because they all felt like they had to be in this .com thing.
Yeah.
And I remember loads of that equipment never even left warehouses. It was literally stockpiled with the distribution companies, ready to go to sites, to people who didn't really even know what they were going to use it for. They just didn't want to be left behind. So I think you're right. You need a war room. And in fairness, I remember, this is going back about 4 or 5 months ago, George Kurian brought a group of us together. There was about 35 or 40 of us, some people like me who are more of the sort of interested observers, the futurists, but then a whole group of people who were looking at AI. And I remember he walked into the room, and the very first thing he said was, the companies that get this right will be 30% more productive than the ones that don't.
Absolutely.
You cannot survive if your competitor is 30% more productive than you are.
He said it today in the keynote, too. $7 trillion productivity increase over the next, 10 years, I think?
Absolutely. So you can't
Monumental.
ignore that. Yeah, you can't ignure that. So, and I think that's where it's getting interesting for me, is that we've started to move beyond the hero workloads, the solving cancer, which are great things, but they're the exclusivity of the very, very top kind of 2, 3, 4% of organizations. We're now starting to see the reality of, every organization starting to look at, okay, but what's the use case for me? And like I say, I think your idea of, companies need to create a war room of different individuals to start saying, okay, how do we start to bring these improvements, these productivity improvements to life across lots of different areas of our business.
And be creative. Brainstorm. Bring all the heads of departments together and be like, how would you like to use AI? Where could you use the most help?
Yeah.
What if you could do XYZ? What would that help? Have those conversations, because those are going to be the big things that will help you to solidify what your path forward is.
Yeah.
And I don't think enough of that's happening. I think there's a lot of excitement about all of the new technology and hardware, and oh my God, right? Mm-hmm. But there's also a lot of sticker shock around the price and the cost. And I know something that's near and dear to you, we talked about earlier, sustainability. So it has profound impacts on sustainability and carbon footprint. So I look at this, again, through two different lenses. There's the consumer excitement of, I can use ChatGPT to write my next email.
Yep.
And then there's the actual, what's the word I'm looking for? The weight of what it was going to take to implement a proper RAG solution.
I agree.
Properly.
And if I tie those two things together, because you talked about sustainability, right? Yeah. We are at the beginning of a data explosion because of AI, right? It's been pretty big up until now. You've heard me talk about the global data sphere by 2030 is going to be 1 yottabyte of data, right? So it's massive. Now that's everything created by everything. But even in data centers, the amount of data that we're creating, it's 1 to 2% of the world's electricity by 2030 will be powering storage devices.
Wow.
Which is just mind-blowing.
I can't even get my head around that.
But then there's the other statistics. So thinking about it from a sustainability perspective, the numbers are about 68% of the data that we create is never ever used again after it's created.
Yeah.
So I look at that from a sustainability angle, but how do you solve that? And I also think that maybe that's a use case. If I could vectorize that data and point a large language model at it, what could I go and ask of that data that I'm currently doing nothing with at all? What could we learn from it? What could we find out from that data And if we can't find out anything from it, does that now give me a target to be able to reduce the impact of it, to move it somewhere, to, God forbid, delete it, right?
Does the data become less useful?
Does the data become less useful? Because now you've squeezed all of the value out of it.
Yeah.
And if you keep looking at it, you keep asking it questions through RAG, and you're not getting any useful information back, you kind of wrung that as much as you can. So I think you're then in a better position to say, do we even need this? So I think AI has the potential to, whilst it will create a lot more data, I think it offers a potential to help us solve some of the data waste problem that we've got.
Yeah.
And that's a kind of fascinating use case for me.
I think part of what you were just describing for me as well is you have to get past novelty. So it's cool to point it at your backups from 1998.
Yeah.
How useful is that? It's not, really.
No.
It's cool. It's kind of cool that you can still pull all that stuff up and query against it and see what it was in Betty Sue's spreadsheet in accounting in 1998.
Yeah.
It's not useful. And for some reason, we keep a lot of that stuff around is for audits and things like that. But at the same time, I look at it as like, how do you determine what's useful and not? I don't know that we've figured that out yet. I look at things like what Chris went over in the keynote today as the global namespaces and then throwing classification on top of that or within that. And that's going to be able to give you a sorting and filtering mechanism to be able to look through, all right, access, how many times has it been accessed? You can really start to drill down into how it's being used, or if not at all. And then you can make a kind of a decision an informed decision about what to do with it.
You know, and the challenge, one of the challenges is going to be the same challenge that we've bounced around for the last 40 plus years, which is who actually owns the data and is going to make that decision. Because, you know, we've both been in this industry for a little while. If you go and talk to the application teams, they say, well, it's not our data, it's the IT guys own the data.
Yeah.
And you go and talk to the IT guys and they say, no, we're just the custodians of the data. At some point, companies or somebody within an organization is going to have to take responsibility, because we can't keep storing 2/3 or more data that is single use, consuming vast amounts of power that has no value to businesses. So I think AI offers us an opportunity, but I think it's still going to come down to who inside an organization is going to be authorized, approved, trusted to make a decision about what do we actually keep. And we haven't solved it for the last 40 years. I'm not sure how we solve it for the next.
It's a good point that still needs to be solved. I'll throw an example out there, and we can sort of rap about this for a second to close things out. Where does the responsibility lie, going back to the sustainability angle? So if individual companies manage their own data, what about the service providers? What about the social media networks that have petabytes of photos and historical messages, posts, videos, whatever they may have, from 2007?
Yeah.
How much do we really need to keep that stuff? So I guess what I'm saying is the responsibility on the user of those platforms to kind of manicure and curate that data as needed, or is the responsibility on the services and the platforms themselves to kind of nudge the user to, hey, do you really still need this?
So, my sort of feeling is that they can't fix that problem, right? The reality is it sits with whoever is the owner of the data. So I think what we'll see with the big service providers, the hyperscale providers, the big social media networks, is they will drive towards powering the things that they do with renewable energy. And they've got a long way to go. Let's be completely frank about that. They have a stated ambition to be running off renewables. There's a lot of work still to be done. So I think for them, their view will be, actually, we don't care. You know, if you're storing it, you're paying for it, you're using it, as long as we're powering that technology with renewable energy, actually, there isn't an emissions problem that we need to solve. I think the challenge is going to be with companies who run data centers, data cupboards.
Cupboards. That's a good word.
But my other favorite one is somebody said to me, "What is a data center?" And I said, for most organizations, it's a museum of past IT decisions,
right?
Which they are. So I think there's a huge number of companies that are going to struggle to be running off completely renewable energy. So they're going to have to look at optimization strategies. They're going to have to look at how do we reduce the carbon footprint, not just of data. You know, servers are 40% of power consumption. You know, so I think it's going to be a real mix of different strategies, but I think the big ones, the hyperscale providers, the big social media companies, they have to start looking at and seriously using almost 100% renewable energy, and that will be the way that they solve for the problem.
I think that's one of the ways, absolutely. I look at hydroelectric power as potentially coming up as getting a bit of a renaissance. I know nuclear is going through a bit of a renaissance right now.
Little small nuclear reactors.
I do think that. I was talking to, I think it was John Woodall was talking about it earlier. I think now that we've sort of unlocked fusion a little bit, I think we can now look at, okay, what's the world look like in 10 years when everyone has a tiny fusion reactor in their garage?
Yeah.
Powering their house, powering their electric vehicles. Right? That's kind of crazy to think about that's possible.
But Microsoft just recently appointed a head of nuclear power research. Yep. So, those big companies...
they bought and are powering up 3 Mile Island again, which...
There you go.
It's debatable whether that's smart or not, but I guess we're going to find out.
That's right. Yeah, I think things like that are going to be interesting.
Yeah.
If you go to... I was talking about how much power is consumed by data centers, just because it fascinated me. In Ohio, right now, there are 90 data centers that are currently on hold that have not been granted permission by the state.
This is aside from the Intel fabs that are being built there?
That's right, yeah. Aside from all of that, there are 90 data centers. There's more that are in progress. There's about 270 that are planned, but there are 90 that are currently on hold. Those 90 are really... The reason they're on hold is because Ohio does not have a power network that is robust enough, that has enough energy in it to be able to power these 90 data centers. So you immediately think, well... What's the power consumption of 90 data centers? 20 million homes. 90 data centers is the equivalent of powering 20 million residential properties.
Then why aren't we building data centers out in the middle of, I don't know, the flyover states where there's no, I don't want to say civilization, but I mean, there's so much vast empty land out there. I feel like Amazon did a really good job of taking advantage of some of that for placing their giant distribution centers and stuff, and it kind of helped jobs locally as well. So I look at that why are we trying to cram them all into Ohio? Not exactly the largest of states, but I love the fact that it's bringing technology and technology work to areas like that. But at the same time, I think, aren't there ways that we could... one of the things I heard Microsoft was talking about was they wanted to have, for every data center or every pool of data centers, an accompanying nuclear reactor they were going to build with it. This is one of their philosophies going forward, which I love. Thank you, Microsoft, for taking that approach. I think it's going to take stuff like that to get to these 270, you said?
There's I think it's about 270 that are sort of in the works.
Just in Ohio?
Just in Ohio. And of which 90 are currently on hold. And there's a whole political case that's going through at the moment because the power companies are effectively saying, for us to build an infrastructure to power that quantity of data centers, you need to make a payment and a commitment of 75%. In fact, they're asking for 90% of the power you're going to use over, let's say, a 10-year term. We need that up front in order to justify the investment that we will need to make into the grid.
So that we can deliver that.
So that we can deliver it, right? Yeah. So it's fascinating. I mean, anybody who's watching this, you drive down a motorway or you drive down the freeway and you can see a data center. They're fairly distinctive, right? Next time you drive past one, just realize that one data center is probably consuming about as much power as a small town.
Yeah.
It's probably 10, 20, 30, 40,000 people. Yeah. That one warehouse. And most of this is not coming from renewables, and data is a huge part of the problem. And, we're saying with AI, it's not just data. AI requires a lot of compute. The racks inside these systems now, or inside these data centers, we used to build sort of 7 kilowatt racks. Now we're building 150, 200 kilowatt racks. I mean, it's staggering, right?
It's crazy. And we used to, and this is literally what I started out doing in the late 90s, was installing generators and running into transformers and PDUs.
And standing on the roof of a data center spraying it with...
No, I wasn't doing that. I never did that. We did push a Sun V880 off of a parking deck one time. That was a fun story. I'll tell you guys about that one sometime.
I almost dropped you in it then, didn't I?
Yeah. No, looking at the numbers that we used to use, so you typically see your PDUs have 20 amp, 30 amp breaker kind of settings on them. are we this? I think this is going to spur even more than that as we start to evolve the way power delivery happens in data centers. We're going to need new PDUs. We're going to need new power cables that are capable of delivering that level of electricity. The new Vino system, or the new systems that we launched earlier this year, have 2,000 watt power supplies in them.
Right.
4 of them per pair.
Yeah.
And I'm going, now they're smart, they're very efficient, they only power up what they actually need. Side note.
Yeah.
But that is 8,000 watts of power available at your fingertips should you decide to turn it up to 11.
Yeah.
That's just a 3U storage system.
Yeah, and it still relatively pales in comparison to some of the big GPU devices, that are out there as well. So
you stick that thing next to an H100 and
and it's going to lead to all sorts of interesting things as well. We're going to start to see, liquid cooling and, immersion cooling seems to be making a little bit of a comeback around certain things as well. So, but I'm straying way off topic here. But
I love this conversation though. This is so I want to let's wrap things up with a couple of plugs. You were recently on a show on Amazon called The Futurist, right?
Yes.
Can you tell us about that? What was that like?
That was one of the most fun projects I've been involved with. I got into the whole sustainability thing about 4 or 5 years ago. Part of my looking to the future about what do we need to start paying some attention to. And I kind of incubated that inside NetApp, brought a lot of people together and, just tried to get more people excited about the topic and really thinking about the topic. And it's been great to see so many people from so many parts of NetApp so enthusiastic, kind of wanting to be part of this sustainability thing. That's been great. But then we had a call from our PR agency saying Ian Khan's been in touch, who's the futurist, and he wants to do a show around sustainability. Is it something NetApp want to get involved with? So we came up with this idea of let's talk about our partnership with Aston Martin Formula One. And of course, most people think, Formula One, sustainability? How do you match those two things together?
Right.
But for those of you who don't know, Formula One is on a goal to be completely net zero by 2030.
Yep.
And that's not just the teams, that's the circuits. That's everybody coming to the circuits. So we sort of looked at it, and it was part of the reason we decided to work with Aston Martin was how cool would that be to be part of a sport that so many hundreds of thousands of people love and be part of that journey to help making it sustainable. And that was the episode. We did this whole episode on Amazon Prime Video with Ian Khan, the futurist, around the work that we're doing with Aston Martin. And it's we went to the factory, we shot at the factory, we met the CIO, Claire Lansley. Honestly, to have been through the kind of journey that I've been on over the last sort of 5 or 6 years, and then to sort of end it, because I'm really starting to try and move on to other things now, but to sort of end it by doing that episode, showcasing the work that we've been doing, showcasing the partnership with Aston Martin Formula One, for me was just like a dream come true. It was just one of those amazing moments.
Yeah, I haven't got to see it yet. I'm really looking forward to it. We've been doing a lot of planning with this, but
cool.
I'm really looking forward to seeing. I'm excited about it. My boss Paul Vanderlingen is also
he's in it as well.
Yep, he's also a part of it. So shout out to Paul. Thank you very much for telling me about that. I'm looking forward to seeing you guys doing that stuff. And I think F1 is an interesting one because it's not one you would think of. But the amount of data that goes into some of those, into motorsport in general. Is insane at this point. The amount of sensors there's something like 1,000 sensors on each one of those cars. Yeah, it's ridiculous.
And what you have to realize as well, as we were talking to Claire and we were talking to the team over there are just things you don't realize. Our equipment, because we ship, it's flex pods that we have.
Yeah.
They're one of the few things that actually shipped with the car. So there's very little else that ships with the car. Everything else goes separately. But the flex pods ship with the car. And the reason they ship with the car is they can't start the car without the mini data centers at trackside.
What? I had no idea.
So literally our equipment ships with them. So part of what we're doing with them isn't just about being, storing more data in less space. It's about how do we reduce weight. So we've also gone on, our efficiency is more than just saving money. It's about every disk we can take out is kilograms that come off the logistics, that come off the freight when these things have to ship. So every time they ship a car to circuit or the cars to circuit, there is a flex pod, a mini data center that goes with them and ships. And it's like I say, it's the only thing that ships with the cars.
That's really cool.
So that's pretty cool.
You mentioned earlier you wrote a book. Tell people about the book if you don't mind, because I'm really looking forward to reading it as well.
Yeah, so I mean that was another kind of really interesting project for me because I've struggled with writing. I didn't pass English language at school, English literature, but I've sort of got better over the years doing blogs and things like that. And I sat down over the course of 2 or 3 months and just wrote everything that was in my head, and with no structure to it or anything else. And the more I wrote, the more I started to realize there was a pattern emerging, and you could start to group a lot of the stuff I was writing into sort of 2 or 3 categories. So initially, going back 6 or 9 months ago, the book was called The Third Wave, and we never published it. It was just a book that we used internally for kind of internal education and stuff like that. And then, of course, AI happened.
Yeah.
And particularly in November last year, the ChatGPT, suddenly 200 million AI users. So I updated it, and I wrote this whole section around AI being the 4th wave. We included some bits on sustainability and all those sorts of topics. And we just thought, what the hell, let's publish it. So it's on Amazon.
What was the first wave? Humor me. I'm curious. In your mind.
So there'll be a lot of people watching this that probably weren't even born during the first wave. So for me, it was modularization.
Okay.
It was the shift from the sort of the monolithic technologies. Yeah.
Or the modern transistor, probably.
It was going from, if you remember back to the days, EMC had symmetrics and HDS lightnings, these big, beautiful pieces of technology, but massively inflexible, hugely expensive. So I think the first wave for me was the move towards modular, kind of rack-based type equipment, which is what we all depend on nowadays.
Yep.
The second wave, virtualization, and I say virtualization because you had a choice at the beginning, Citrix, VMware, Hyper-V, KVM. We landed on VMware, for good or for bad, probably a separate discussion. Third wave being cloud, because I think, and the waves for me are truly disruptive. I said earlier on, it's about managing ripples and riding waves.
Yeah.
You have to manage the ripples because they're a natural part of you growing your business. But if you can spot a wave, it offers you a multi-billion-dollar potential, both as a user, as a company that's operating in the space, or as a tech vendor like ourselves.
Yeah.
It was a rewarding process because, again, being somebody who was never very good at writing, to be able to get a book, albeit a small book, out and published and call myself an author was just it was just personally really gratifying.
Well, where can people grab a copy if they're interested in reading it? Are they available here at the show as well?
We did a book signing today.
Nice.
So we gave away a bunch of copies today. We're going to try and schedule another book signing on Wednesday, so we'll give away another few copies. If people are interested, it's on Amazon.
Okay.
So you can download the Kindle version.
Kindle
you
book.
can get a softback. The special hardback edition, which is particularly cool as well.
Are you going to do an audiobook, a narration?
I've been asked, and
you have a good voice for it. You should.
So I think to an American audience, maybe that's the case.
Oh.
But I don't know. I think it's tempting, but I don't know. Maybe if we get enough requests, then.
You heard him, guys. Send in those requests if you want. If you're going to get Matt Watts' book, The Fourth Wave, make sure you send him a note and say he wants you to, or you want him to narrate the audiobook. Matt, this has been fantastic. I always love hanging out with you and talking with you. They are some of the most philosophical conversations sometimes, but usually have the most weight to them as well, and I really appreciate it. Anything else you want to leave with the people before we get out of here for the day?
I don't think so. I think they probably had enough of me droning on about various bits and pieces. I just, look, I'll leave you with this. I just think, I think embracing new things is just so fundamental, and it's something that, as I get older, it becomes more easier to dismiss things because, it requires change, it requires us to adapt, to evolve, and sometimes we don't see the value. So I'll leave you with a quote.
Okay.
And it was from Douglas Adams, who Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. And the quote isn't "Don't panic." He has this expression. He said, "Everything that exists in the world when you're born is normal," which really gets you thinking. But he then goes on to say, everything that comes along between the age of 15 and 35 is an opportunity, and potentially you can build your career around it.
Yeah.
But everything that comes along after you're 35 will bring about the end of the world and must be completely rejected.
Yes.
And I love that expression because every time I see something new and maybe I don't perceive the value, or maybe I almost want to dismiss it, I constantly have that in my head, which reminds me, just because something doesn't have value to me doesn't mean it doesn't have value.
Yeah, our natural inclination at this age is to go, no, hold on, whoa, hang on. But to someone that's 24, 25, that's new in the industry, that can see that vision of the future.
I agree.
That we used to 20, 30 years ago.
Yeah.
Honestly, I think that sometimes we need to just get out of our own way.
Yeah.
And enable them.
Exactly, and that's, so I think that's a good kind of point to leave things with you. It's just it's difficult, but we just constantly have to embrace change. The reality is all of these things are going to happen with or without us, and it's much more fun if it happens with you.
Absolutely. Matt, thank you so much, man. Really appreciate you taking all the extra time, and I'm going to close things out, but go have a beer, and I'll come find you in a little bit.
Absolutely. Look forward to it. Thanks again, Nick.
Thanks, Matt.
Much appreciated.
We did it, guys. We did it. Day one is in the books. As far as what tomorrow's going to look like, tomorrow's going to be a little different. Instead of doing it this late at night, we're going to be doing it first thing in the morning. So the keynote starts at 9 a.m. Pacific, goes for about an hour and a half, and then we're going to be right back here at the desk roughly around 10:30 or as soon as the keynote ends. So make sure you jump into Discord to keep track of everything. Make sure you're following along over on netapp.com or insight.netapp.com for all of the information about the agenda tomorrow. We're going to start early, and we're going to go all day. So make sure you're joining us again. Join Discord. That's the place to be. The hub of the wheel. All the things will be in there. Am I missing anything? No, I think I just need to do some more scribbles. We'll see you guys tomorrow. Thank you so much for joining us. Shout out to Drew Claybrook, our communities manager. Shout out to everybody watching on YouTube. Shout out to everybody watching and hanging with us in Discord. Love you guys. See you tomorrow.